Imagine it's 1985 and Disney thought they could make their own Back to the Future with teenagers, time travel, and a budget that wouldn't cover Marty McFly's sneakers. The result? My Science Project, a gloriously ambitious mess where high schoolers accidentally unleash history's greatest hits through a glowing alien disco ball, complete with dinosaurs stomping through chemistry class. And before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. Alright, let's dive into this forgotten gem of 80s sci-fi chaos. Let's talk about the premise. The year 1985 was absolutely stacked for teen sci-fi. You had Back to the Future changing the game, explorers taking kids to space, and real genius proving nerds could be cool. Into this crowded field came Disney with My Science Project. Their attempt to grab a piece of that sweet teen sci-fi pie while working with what appeared to be the catering budget from one of those other movies. The premise sounds like it was pitched during a particularly inspired lunch break. What if some high school slackers found an alien artifact that could rip holes in time itself and they had to use it for their science fair project? Because apparently turning in a volcano made of baking soda wasn't dramatic enough for the Reagan era. The movie follows Michael Harlan, your typical 80s movie protagonist who's more interested in fixing cars than fixing his grades, as he stumbles upon this mysterious glowing orb in a military junkyard. Instead of doing the sensible thing and leaving it alone, he decides it's perfect for his overdue science project. Because nothing says academic excellence like weaponizing alien technology you found in a scrap heap. The device starts opening portals through time, bringing everything from Neanderthals to futuristic cyborgs into their sleepy Arizona town, turning Harlan High School into the ultimate history lesson gone wrong. Disney was clearly trying to capture that Amblin Entertainment magic on a Disney Channel budget, and the results are exactly as wonderfully chaotic as you'd expect. Let's break down the cast because My Science Project assembled a group of actors who were either on their way up, on their way down, or just passing through Hollywood during a particularly weird week in 1985.
Hey, newsflash update. I got Crystal, all right?
Leading the charge is John Stockwell as Michael Harlan, our car-obsessed slacker hero. Stockwell had that perfect 80s leading man look. Like if you ordered Tom Cruise from a catalog, but got the discount version that was somehow even more charming. He was actually a decent actor who'd go on to direct some solid films like Blue Crush and Crazy Beautiful, but here he's stuck delivering lines like, "This thing's gonna make us famous," with the conviction of someone who knows his paycheck depends on it. What makes Stockwell work is that he completely commits to the role, playing Michael as genuinely likable rather than the typical 80s movie jerk who learns to be better. Then there's Danielle von Zerneck as Ellie Sawyer, the brainy love interest who actually understands what's happening while everyone else is freaking out about dinosaurs in the hallway. Von Zerneck brings genuine charm to what could have been a thankless, smart girl explains science role. And she has real chemistry with Stockwell even when the script makes them say absolutely ridiculous things about temporal displacement theory. But the real scene stealer is Dennis Hopper as Bob Roberts, the conspiracy theorist science teacher who's been waiting his whole career for aliens to show up. Hopper treats this material like he's performing Shakespeare, bringing his trademark intensity to explaining why the government has been hiding interdimensional technology. Only Dennis Hopper could make a line about temporal displacement sound like a manifesto against the military-industrial complex while wearing a cardigan sweater. Fisher Stevens rounds out the main crew as Vince Litello, providing comic relief with his perfectly calibrated 80s sidekick energy that somehow never gets annoying. Analysis. Now let's talk about the real star of this movie, the gloriously uneven special effects that somehow make the whole thing more charming than any modern CGI spectacle. My Science Project had the ambitious vision of a summer blockbuster, but the budget of a really expensive TV movie, and boy, does it show in the most entertaining ways possible. The practical effects are actually pretty impressive for what they were working with. The alien device itself is this beautifully crafted glowing orb that looks genuinely otherworldly, like someone raided the prop department from Close Encounters and bedazzled it with every Christmas light they could find. When characters get sucked into time portals, the swirling vortex effects have that handmade quality that screams, "We built this in someone's garage and we're proud of it." There's something genuinely magical about effects created by actual human hands rather than computer algorithms. But then you get to the creatures, and that's where things get wonderfully weird. The Neanderthal looks like he wandered off the set of a museum diorama, complete with the kind of prosthetic makeup that was cutting edge for community theater. The dinosaurs are a mix of stop-motion animation that would make Ray Harryhausen weep tears of joy, and rubber suits that seem to have their own gravitational pull. That T-Rex stomping through the chemistry lab is pure puppet magic, and you can practically see the love and craftsmanship that went into making a guy in a rubber suit look genuinely threatening. The real magic happens during the time portal sequences, where different historical periods start bleeding into the high school. You've got medieval knights fighting robots in the gymnasium, while prehistoric creatures roam the hallways. And somehow the low-budget chaos makes it feel more authentic than a $100 million CGI fest. It's the kind of practical effects work that reminds you why sometimes limitations breed creativity better than unlimited resources. Let's dive into the scenes that make my science project the beautifully unhinged time travel adventure it is, because this movie delivers moments that will stick in your brain whether you want them to or not. The opening junkyard sequence sets the tone perfectly. Michael and his buddy are basically grave robbing a military scrap heap when they stumble across this glowing alien device that's been sitting there since the 1950s. The fact that the US military just dumped interdimensional technology in a regular junkyard like it's a broken refrigerator is peak 80s movie logic, and we're here for it. There's something wonderfully American about finding alien artifacts next to rusty car parts and thinking, "This'll do for homework." But the real chaos begins when the device activates in the high school. Picture this. You're sitting in chemistry class, minding your own business, when suddenly a portal opens and cavemen start wandering through like they're late for third period. The sheer absurdity of watching Neanderthals interact with 1980s teenagers while the teachers try to maintain order is comedy gold. 1 minute you're learning about the periodic table, the next you're getting a very hands-on history lesson from actual prehistoric humans. The Gymnasium Battle Royale is where the movie completely loses its mind in the best way possible. You've got medieval knights clashing with futuristic soldiers, a Tyrannosaurus Rex somehow fitting through doorways that were clearly not designed for prehistoric predators, and Fisher Stevens screaming his way through what can only be described as the weirdest PE class in cinematic history. It's like someone threw every era of human history into a blender and hit frap, then decided to film the results in a high school. The climax, where they have to shut down the device while reality itself is falling apart around them, perfectly captures that 80s disaster movie energy, where everything explodes, but somehow the teenagers save the day through the power of friendship and questionable science. Let's talk about the audio assault that is My Science Project's soundtrack, because nothing says 1985 sci-fi adventure quite like synthesizers having an existential crisis while electric guitars scream in the background. The score, composed by Peter Bernstein, is pure 80s cheese at its finest. We're talking wall-to-wall synthesizer work that sounds like someone fed a Casio keyboard, nothing but Mountain Dew, and let it loose in a recording studio. Every time a portal opens, you get these swooshing electronic sounds that were probably cutting edge for about 5 minutes in 1985, but now sound like a particularly ambitious arcade game. The main theme tries so hard to be epic and adventurous that it loops back around to being genuinely charming, like a musical equivalent of a golden retriever wearing a superhero costume. But here's where it gets interesting. the score actually works perfectly for the movie's tone. When that T-Rex comes stomping through the hallway, the bombastic orchestral stabs mixed with electronic beats create this beautifully ridiculous atmosphere that lets you know the filmmakers are in on the joke. It's not trying to be John Williams, and that self-awareness makes it infinitely more enjoyable. The real gem is how the music shifts depending on which time period is bleeding through the portals. Medieval sequences get appropriately dramatic orchestral flourishes, while the futuristic robot scenes lean heavy into that Blade Runner-inspired electronic sound. It's like the composer decided to give each era its own musical personality, which is honestly more thoughtful than most blockbusters manage today. The soundtrack perfectly captures that mid-80s moment when synthesizers could do anything, and by God, they were going to try everything at once. Let's dig into the production chaos that somehow resulted in this glorious mess, because the making of My Science Project is almost as entertaining as the movie itself. First off, this was director Jonathan Betuel's follow-up to writing The Last Starfighter, which explains why he thought he could pull off interdimensional time travel on a Disney budget. Betuel had this grand vision of creating a teen adventure that would rival Spielberg's work, but he was working with resources that wouldn't cover craft services on a typical Amblin production. The ambitious scope versus practical limitations created exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that makes 80s B-movies so endearing. The casting process was particularly wild. Dennis Hopper reportedly took the role because he needed the paycheck and thought it would be fun to play a character who wasn't completely unhinged for once. Little did he know that playing a conspiracy theorist science teacher would somehow become one of his more grounded performances. John Stockwell was cast partly because he looked like he could actually fix a car, which was apparently a crucial character requirement that other actors couldn't meet. Interestingly, Matthew Broderick was supposedly considered for the lead role but was deemed too nerdy for a character who was supposed to be more interested in engines than equations. The special effects department had to get incredibly creative with their limited budget. That impressive alien device was actually built by a team of model makers who usually worked on commercials, and they used everything from Christmas lights to disco ball parts to achieve the otherworldly glow. The time portal effects were created using a combination of practical swirling water tanks and early optical effects that required multiple exposures on the same piece of film. The junkyard scenes were shot at an actual military surplus yard in Arizona, where the cast had to work around real military equipment that couldn't be moved. This led to some genuinely dangerous moments when Fisher Stevens nearly got trapped under a piece of machinery during one take. The production also had to deal with desert heat that regularly reached over 100 degrees, which explains why everyone looks genuinely sweaty and uncomfortable in those outdoor scenes. Perhaps the most telling detail, the film's original cut was reportedly much longer, with entire sequences of historical figures interacting in the modern world that had to be trimmed for time and budget reasons. Now let's talk about what happened after My Science Project hit theaters, because this movie's journey from box office disappointment to cult curiosity is almost as wild as its plot, and honestly more inspiring than most Hollywood success stories. When it opened in August 1985, My Science Project landed with all the cultural impact of a wet paper bag thrown against a brick wall. It was going head-to-head with Back to the Future, which was still dominating theaters after 3 months, and Real Genius, which had actual star power with Val Kilmer being charming and brilliant. Disney's little time travel experiment got absolutely crushed, making only about $4 million against its $8 million budget. Critics weren't exactly kind either, with most reviews basically saying, well, at least they tried, in the most diplomatic way possible. Roger Ebert gave it 2 stars and called it earnest, which in critic speak translates to bless their hearts. But here's where it gets interesting. Home video saved this movie's bacon in the most beautiful way possible. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, My Science Project became a staple of video rental stores, sitting right there in the sci-fi section next to actually good movies like Blade Runner and The Terminator. Kids who missed it in theaters discovered it during sleepovers and lazy Saturday afternoons, and suddenly, this forgotten Disney experiment found its audience. There's something about stumbling across a movie where dinosaurs fight robots in a high school gymnasium that sticks with you for decades. The internet age has been particularly kind to my science project, transforming it from forgotten curiosity to beloved camp classic. It's become the perfect example of so bad it's good cinema, spawning countless YouTube video essays, Reddit threads, and social media posts about forgotten 80s gems. The movie's complete commitment to its ridiculous premise, combined with those charmingly low-budget effects, makes it infinitely more rewatchable than bigger-budget disasters from the same era. It's also quietly influenced a whole generation of filmmakers who grew up watching it on VHS, with its anything-can-happen energy and genre-blending chaos showing up in everything from Stranger Things to modern superhero movies. The film's willingness to throw historical periods together without explanation feels surprisingly modern in our remix culture. Sometimes the movies that fail commercially end up succeeding culturally in ways nobody could have predicted. So there you have it, My Science Project. The movie that proved sometimes the best sci-fi comes from big dreams and small budgets. Did you grow up renting this gem from Blockbuster? Or are you discovering it for the first time? Drop your favorite forgotten 80s sci-fi movies in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that time forgot but we never will.